In 1984, we had a very severe drought, which caused a lot of damage to the agricultural sector. In 1991, the donor community decided to freeze all aid, and that caused a major, major problem. Government had no option but to accept.
Before Kenya found its footing as a young nation, childhood in rural Kenya was shaped by resilience, distance, and sacrifice in the early 1950s. Young Eric walked barefoot 4 kilometers each morning in pursuit of an education through dusty roads, unfinished schools, and a country still under colonial rule. He could not have known it then, but his journey would one day mirror the story of a nation preparing to take charge of its own future.
I went to school in 1951, and the school was 5 kilometers from my home. I used to walk to school every morning. And in those days, we had no shoes, nothing. Sat for, I think it was called Common Entrance Examination. I think it was called CAPE then. I was picked to join Alliance High School. Sat for Cambridge in 1962. Then proceeded to University of East Africa. That comprised Makerere University, Dar es Salaam University, and University College Nairobi. I picked the course of commerce, went therefore to University of East Africa, University College Nairobi. Because I had done accounting, I joined the Ministry of Local Government as a finance officer.
In the years following independence, a new generation of Kenyans began stepping into institutions once managed almost entirely by colonial administrators. Education became the bridge between colonial Kenya and an emerging African leadership class. Across government, the country was building local capacity for a new era, and a new generation of professionals was stepping into leadership.
And after a few months, I was posted to Western Kenya, to Kakamega, as a provincial local government officer. After a while, about a year or so, government decided to withdraw the services. During the process of withdrawing those services, I was recalled to Nairobi to come and work with those expatriates. And after that, I applied for a job through Public Service Commission to become an executive officer of what was called Residential Premises Rent Tribunal. And then again, there was advertised a job in a new establishment called Industrial Survey and Promotion Center. So I applied for that position. I was called a co-director. After that came another opportunity, which was a position for managing director of Kenya National Trading Corporation. I succeeded, so I became the managing director of Kenya National Trading Corporation. After serving there for about 5 years or so, surprisingly, I was appointed Deputy Governor of Central Bank. That was in 1984. The governor at that time was Philip Ndegwa. Philip Ndegwa was a very organized person, a very systematic person. And I found him very kind. He was, of course, extremely knowledgeable about anything and everything. He was a very well-educated person. And I think he had taken very big responsibilities even before he became governor. But he was very kind, and he was very useful in developing people. I would like to say that I think whatever I came to know, it was essentially through him. He gave me a lot of responsibility, a lot of duties to perform. Taking those responsibilities, and learning a lot of things and reporting to him so that he could assist and correct here and there. So I served as Deputy Governor until 1988 when I was appointed governor. I served as governor from 1988 to 1993. I remember going to Kisumu to find a site for a central bank building. So we started with Kisumu, Central Bank that time, which eventually expanded, of course, during my time. But we also established a branch in Eldoret. The idea was to provide services to the whole economy by making services more readily available to the commercial banks in those areas.
Eric Kotut entered the Central Bank of Kenya at a time when the country was facing one of its most difficult economic periods. Agriculture, the backbone of Kenya's foreign exchange earnings, had been devastated, and the nation now faced the challenge of rebuilding a struggling economy.
The landscape was shaped by the events that had occurred in 1984. In 1984, we had a very severe drought, which caused a lot of damage to our agricultural sector. And of course, the economy had relied on agriculture. We had relied on tea and coffee particularly for foreign currency earnings. Now, after 1984, the situation then was how or what to do in order to revive the economy. Among the things which the government did then was to seek donor funding. Donor funding was granted by all the main donors, starting with the World Bank, IMF. In those days, there was something called CEDA and other donors. However, at the same time, the donor community, especially through the World Bank and IMF, was asking developing countries all over, it started with Latin America, but then now Africa, to adopt a structural adjustment program.
As the 1984 drought tightened its grip on the economy, Kenya turned to international partners for support. The help came, but it came with conditions. Structural adjustment programs swept across Africa, and Kenya was no exception. Markets were liberalized, government spending cut, and key sectors restructured. It was a difficult chapter, but it was a transformative one.
The idea behind this was that you wanted government to be less involved in administration of the economy. You wanted the private sector to be the dominant player in the economy, and you wanted government merely to provide infrastructure and other support services. They wanted industry to be made more efficient. And according to them, an efficient industry was one that was subjected to external competition. Government accepted the ideas, obviously, because they needed the support, introduced what was called Sessional Paper, number 1 of 1986, which provided for policies and measures to be taken in order to revive the economy and grow the economy to the year 2000. But whilst we were liberalizing, according to that objective, what was happening in the political scene was also dramatic.
As economic reforms unfolded, political pressure was also rising. For years, Kenya had operated as a one-party state, but the calls for change could no longer be ignored. Civil society, the church, lawyers, and ordinary Kenyans were pushing for democratic reform. International donors added their weight to those demands.
There was a campaign and agitation for multi-party democracy. To understand why this was important, Kenya was a one-party state, according to the Constitution. The history of this is that in 1964, soon after independence, the opposition party, which was called KADU, folded up to join the ruling party, which was KANU, to form one party. During my period, therefore, The problem was how to get out of that, how to get out of that constitutional trap. So there were many groups which are very articulate, which are campaigning to get that system changed. And they succeeded in receiving support from donors. So all aid was frozen. And that caused a major problem, obviously, in terms of creating a foreign currency crisis and creating a budgetary crisis, because government was now also relying on donors for budgetary support. Government had no option but to accept. So towards the end of that year, they decided to amend the constitution by deleting Section 2A and to make the country a multi-party country.
I am glad to inform Kenyans that I have today assented to the bill as a sign of my commitment to political reform.
President Moi's announcement changed the political landscape overnight, but the economic consequences of that transition were already in motion. Donors had made their position clear for the central bank. The question was no longer political, it was operational. How do you keep an economy moving?
With regard to reaction or response to the suspension of donor funding and the crisis that developed as a result, we as central bank took the risk of liberalizing the foreign exchange market. And we did this by introducing what was called foreign currency retention accounts. What that was is we allowed exporters to retain their foreign currency earnings in authorized banks and to use those funds for any authorized purposes. We also introduced something called foreign exchange bearer certificate. What that was is if anybody with foreign currency come from abroad, foreign currency or whatever, foreign currency outside the export system, you are allowed to obtain a foreign currency certificate for whatever amount you had in the bank, and you are allowed to trade that certificate in the market at the market exchange rate. The effect of those two initiatives was to create a parallel market for foreign exchange. And the effect of it was that it attracted a substantial amount of foreign currency, because people could come and earn decent amounts with their foreign currency. And that, in effect, stabilized the financial system despite the freeze of donor funding. After the elections and the formation of the new government, a review of the situation was made together with donors, and it was agreed, the government agreed to totally liberalize the economy. So they abolished exchange control, they abolished import licensing, they abolished many things. And soon, therefore, after, many parties, not many, but about 4 or 5 parties came into being, but it started with one party, it was called Ford. And then that Ford split into parties. One was Ford Asili, another one was Ford Kenya. And then another party also came into the picture, it was called DP. These are the parties, together with KANU, which now competed for power in the 1992 general elections. That political competition was very hectic, and it caused a bit of instability, of course, in the financial system. But at the end of it, things settled down, and a new government was formed. The political situation kind of stabilized.
By 1988, a separate challenge was emerging within the financial system itself. non-bank financial institutions had been licensed with insufficient capital and inadequate oversight. The financial system was exposed. The response was decisive.
Going back to 1988, there was another problem, which was a bit of instability in the financial system, because there were a number of institutions, especially non-bank institutions, which had been licensed with insufficient capital, inadequate management, and the rest of it, and they were quite weak. Some of them were facing insolvency. So the question was how to remove that instability and how to deal with that problem.
CBK responded with sweeping reforms, new laws, strengthened oversight, supervision, and depositor protection.
Let me start with the bank's response to the instability of the financial system. The first thing was to intensify inspections in order to identify more specifically the institutions that were weak. We recommended and government accepted that we form an institution that provides an umbrella for these weak institutions. This was the idea of creating a new bank, and we did. It was called Consolidated Bank of Kenya. And the idea was this bank would consolidate the assets and liabilities of all these weak institutions, bring them together, and then provide support for them. At the same time, and even more importantly, a new Banking Act was enacted, a 1989 Banking Act. This act was enacted to consolidate all the amendments which had been done over a long period to provide for detailed systems for managing the banking system. So it provided for what the powers of the central bank would be, what the requirements would be for banks to provide information to the central bank. More importantly, that bank also created formally the Deposit Protection Fund Board. This was now a legal institution. First of all, would mobilize resources for supporting weak financial institutions. And secondly, for monitoring the activities of banking institutions. Because the idea was that this fund will protect the interests of depositors.
Reforming the sector also meant investing in people. An effective financial system is only as strong as those running it. To support the future of banking in Kenya, CBK helped establish the Kenya College of Banking, building the skills needed to guide a rapidly evolving financial system.
One more thing that we did as a bank was we considered the need for effective training for management and staff of institutions, especially the non-bank institutions, which did not have training facilities of their own. So we proposed, and it was agreed, to establish College of Banking and Finance, which was to train staff the banking sector so that you enhance the management capacities of those institutions. The central bank during my time placed a lot of emphasis on human development. Indeed, the bank had a specific training division whose job was to look for training opportunities and look at the needs for training among the staff. In addition, there was a training committee of the bank. The training committee of the bank was to make sure that the bank got the opportunity to train the staff of all categories on a continuous basis. Our role was to identify areas of potential training opportunities locally or abroad, and indeed there were very many openings. including sending some staff to IMF and some to World Bank, and we sent some to India and places like that. It so happened that the training committee was chaired by the deputy governor, which happens to have been me. So we put a lot of emphasis on training because we wanted to develop human capital, because we were aware that the bank was growing and evolving, and you needed people to develop their skills in order to handle the challenges that came about through that process of growing.
Through periods of uncertainty, reform and political transition, CBK continued evolving into one of Africa's most respected central banks. The challenges may have changed, but the mission remains the same.
The message, first of all, to the people of Kenya is that they should be proud of their central bank. Their central bank is one of the most advanced central banks in Africa. I want also to say that we have to congratulate the central bank for its performance, which is illustrated very clearly by the current status, a stable exchange rate, which is very important for the economy because it gives confidence to investors and everybody else. While maintaining a stable exchange rate, the central bank has been able to build substantial foreign reserves, again under difficult circumstances. They have a record level of reserves currently, which is highly commendable. We know that there are many challenges going forward because there are so many changes happening, new payment systems coming into play. For example, Africa has got to create new payment system as we develop a common market for the continent. There's BRICS coming along, and that brings about challenges with regard to payment systems. Now, this requires new skills, and we wish the central bank to continue developing their skills in order to be able to navigate this complicated system going forward. So we'd like to congratulate the central bank and central bank management and central bank staff for their good work. We want to wish them the very best of luck going forward, and congratulations for what you have done so far.